Imagine a woman who doesn't need anyone to fill her silence. A woman who thrives in her own company. A woman who is completely unshakable. Most people will see her and think she's lonely. They will assume she is waiting for someone to complete her, to validate her existence, to rescue her from herself. But what they don't understand, what the world refuses to acknowledge, is that a woman who chooses to spend time alone is quietly dangerous, not loud, not aggressive, not hostile, but dangerous in a way that will challenge everything you think you know about strength, power, and control. This woman has looked inside herself, and she has faced the parts most people run from. She has confronted her fears, her insecurities, her triggers, and she has survived. She has learned to sit with her own mind until clarity replaces confusion, until calm replaces chaos. She sees patterns others miss, feels truths others avoid, and senses intentions before they are spoken. And because of this, she cannot be manipulated, deceived, or controlled. She does not beg. She does not chase. She does not sacrifice her peace for approval or attention. She moves through life with purpose and precision, and those who are used to relying on emotional leverage or inconsistency feel powerless around her. She is selective, discerning, and her standards are non-negotiable. When she enters a relationship, a friendship, or any connection, she does so from abundance, not desperation. By the time you finish watching this video, you will understand why a woman who spends time alone is more powerful than most people will ever be. You will see why her silence is louder than words, why her independence is more intimidating than aggression, and why her inner peace is a force that no one can contain. Stay until the end, because once you truly understand this, your perception of strength and the kind of woman who embodies it will never be the same again. When a woman chooses solitude, the first thing people misunderstand is that something must be missing. They assume loneliness, rejection, emotional failure. But solitude is not the absence of people, it is the presence of awareness, and awareness changes everything. A woman who spends time alone is no longer reacting to the world blindly. She is observing it. She is studying herself without distraction, without performance, without the need to be liked in the moment. This is where clarity is born. In silence, the mind becomes honest. There is no one to impress, no narrative to maintain, no emotional noise to drown out uncomfortable truths. And so she begins to notice patterns, why she keeps attracting the same kind of people, why certain behaviors trigger her so deeply, why she tolerates things that drain her. Most people never sit long enough with themselves to ask these questions seriously. They stay busy because reflection threatens the identity they have built to survive. But a woman who chooses solitude is brave enough to dismantle that identity piece by piece. This clarity sharpens her perception of others. When you are constantly surrounded by people, you learn how to perform. When you are alone, you learn how to see. She starts recognizing tone before words, energy before promises, consistency before attraction. She does not need dramatic proof to know when something is off. Her nervous system is calm, and a calm nervous system detects subtlety. That is why manipulation becomes obvious to her. Not because she is suspicious, but because she is present. People who rely on confusion, mixed signals, and emotional chaos lose their power around her. She is not rushing to fill silence, so she hears what others reveal unintentionally. She watches how someone behaves when there is nothing to gain. She notices who respects boundaries without argument. She notices who disappears when she stops overgiving. And once you see these things clearly, you cannot unsee them. Solitude also breaks the addiction to external validation. When a woman is always surrounded by voices, she begins to measure herself through reaction. Approval feels like worth. Attention feels like love. Solitude interrupts this cycle. At first it is uncomfortable, then it becomes grounding, then it becomes liberating. She no longer needs someone else's presence to confirm her value. Her self-respect becomes internal, not negotiated. This is why her standards begin to rise naturally, without effort. Not because she read a rule book, but because clarity demands alignment. Once you see clearly, you cannot pretend you do not. You cannot tolerate inconsistency without feeling internal conflict. You cannot stay in environments that require self-betrayal. Clarity does not make her harsh, it makes her honest, and honesty changes the way she communicates. She speaks less but says more. She does not argue endlessly because clarity does not need to convince. She explains once. If misunderstood, she observes instead of forcing comprehension. This is deeply unsettling to people who are used to emotional reactions. They expect chaos, they expect defense. What they encounter instead is composure. A woman who has learned clarity through solitude does not confuse intensity with depth. She does not confuse attention with intimacy. She does not confuse potential with reality. She looks at what is, not what could be. And that alone saves her from years of emotional exhaustion. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing yourself without witnesses, from having sat with your fears and realizing they do not own you, from discovering that silence does not collapse you, it strengthens you. This confidence does not announce itself, it is felt, and it changes how others approach her. The most powerful part of clarity is this: it makes self-betrayal impossible to ignore. Once a woman sees clearly, staying in the wrong place hurts more than leaving. Pretending costs more than walking away. And so she chooses herself, not dramatically, not loudly, but consistently. That is the danger of a woman who spends time alone. She does not need saving, she does not need convincing, she has already seen the truth. And once you see clearly, you are never the same again. When a woman becomes emotionally self-sufficient, she transforms in ways that most people will never fully understand. This is not about being cold or detached. This is about mastering the internal world that most people outsource to others. Most people spend their lives expecting someone else to validate their worth, to calm their fears, to fix their emotions, or to supply their happiness. And because of that, they remain vulnerable, reactive, and in subtle ways dependent. But a woman who chooses emotional self-sufficiency has stepped off that treadmill. She no longer relies on anyone to stabilize her inner world, and this changes everything. Emotional self-sufficiency begins with understanding that your emotions belong to you, not to anyone else. When you cry, when you feel anger, when you experience desire or disappointment, those feelings are yours to own. They are signals, not instructions for others. A woman who has learned this does not look to someone else to make her feel complete, nor does she allow another person to dictate the rhythm of her happiness. She experiences fully, feels deeply, and then chooses how to respond, not because someone else coerced her, but because she controls her own inner landscape. This autonomy creates a quiet power. When a woman no longer depends on others for her emotional equilibrium, she becomes impervious to the manipulations that enslave most people. Fear tactics, guilt-tripping, emotional withdrawal, or love bombing no longer hold sway. She has walked through the storm of her own mind and survived. She has learned that the loudest voices, whether external or internal, do not need to dictate her choices. In this way, she becomes untouchable, not because she is unfeeling, but because she is anchored. What makes her truly dangerous to those who thrive on control is that her independence cannot be bargained with or coerced. She will not chase. She will not plead. She will not compromise her peace for validation. Emotional self-sufficiency teaches her that her value is intrinsic, that she is worthy of respect without having to earn it through performance, charm, or sacrifice. This shifts the entire dynamic in her relationships. People who are used to emotional leverage suddenly find that it no longer works. They expect desperation, dependence, or submission, and they are met with calm autonomy instead. This is not to say that she avoids connection or that she is immune to love. On the contrary, she loves fully but selectively. She chooses connection from a place of abundance, not scarcity. She enters relationships not out of need, but out of desire. She engages not to fill a void, but to enhance a life tea. Hat is already complete. This balance is terrifying to those who profit from insecurity because her presence exposes their immaturity and reliance on control. Emotional self-sufficiency is not a defense mechanism, it is a standard that cannot be negotiated. Another aspect of her self-sufficiency is accountability to herself. She does not blame others for her feelings. She does not project her insecurities onto partners, friends, or colleagues. She examines her reactions and asks difficult questions. Why did this affect me? Why did I feel triggered? How can I respond with clarity rather than reaction? This kind of introspection is exhausting for most people, which is why they avoid it. But for her, it becomes a habit, and habit turns into resilience. Resilience turns into power. She learns to navigate conflict differently. She does not escalate unnecessary drama, nor does she allow disrespect to slide. She communicates with precision, and when necessary, she walks away quietly. She does not argue for attention or affection because she knows that neither should be extracted through force. Emotional self-sufficiency frees her from the tyranny of approval-seeking, from the anxiety of performance, and from the pain of emotional manipulation. She becomes a force that cannot be moved by anything less than truth, respect, and authenticity. The most important truth about a woman who has mastered emotional self-sufficiency is that she has nothing to prove. She does not measure her worth by external reactions. She does not negotiate her peace to make others comfortable. She does not shrink herself to fit into someone else's expectations. And this creates a presence that is magnetic, intimidating, and transformative. People cannot ignore her, but they cannot control her either. Her independence is not isolation. It is mastery. It is not arrogance. It is clarity. It is not coldness, it is freedom. And in a world where so many are still dependent on external validation, a woman who has achieved this level of emotional self-sufficiency is a quiet earthquake. She shifts dynamics, exposes truths, and forces others to confront their own reliance on dependency. When you encounter a woman like this, you realize that she is not just surviving life, she is commanding it. She does not wait for permission, approval, or love to exist fully. She has claimed her inner world, and in doing so, she has claimed her power. And once that power is claimed, it is untouchable. A woman who is emotionally self-sufficient cannot be manipulated, coerced, or diminished. She is dangerous not because she wishes to harm anyone, but because she will never allow anyone to harm herself. And that is a force the world has never been able to contain. When a woman spends time alone, clarity and self-sufficiency are only the beginning. What comes next, what transforms her into a truly formidable presence, is the natural elevation of her standards. This is not something she forces, it emerges quietly, almost imperceptibly, from the discipline of solitude and self-awareness. She begins to notice what aligns with her life and what does not. She begins to discern value, not in a superficial sense, but in terms of energy, consistency, and depth. And this discernment is what makes her dangerous to the superficial, the insecure, and the uncommitted. Most people never raise their standards because they are afraid of scarcity. They fear that if they demand too much, they will be left alone, unloved, or unnoticed. But a woman who has walked through her own solitude has learned that scarcity is an illusion. True connection is not a numbers game. It is about resonance. It is about authenticity. She no longer tolerates superficial effort disguised as care. She no longer settles for words without actions, for promises without consistency, or for presence without respect. Her standards are not born of arrogance. They are born of understanding what it takes to preserve her peace and integrity. Once her standards rise, she becomes selective, and selection is not about judgment in the ordinary sense. It is about alignment. She chooses people, experiences, and opportunities that enhance her life, that honor her time, that respect her boundaries. Everything else falls away naturally. Weak connections, performative interactions, and manipulative behaviors cannot survive her presence. People who are used to bending others to their will or relying on emotional leverage are met with quiet, impenetrable boundaries. She does not need to fight or argue. The misalignment is obvious, her clarity exposes it, and the unworthy are filtered out without drama. This selectivity extends beyond relationships. It touches every aspect of her life: career, friendships, passions, and commitments. She does not settle for mediocrity in any area because she has learned that mediocrity corrodes energy and erodes confidence. When she enters a room, her energy signals that she expects integrity, consistency, and authenticity. She does not negotiate her values for convenience or comfort. And this is where many people feel the threat of her presence. They are used to compromise being framed as adaptability, but for her, compromise is measured against standards, not convenience. A woman with high standards also refuses to tolerate emotional instability disguised as intensity. She has learned to recognize patterns of inconsistency. She knows when someone is capable of love and commitment, and she knows when someone is performing, manipulating, or avoiding responsibility. This knowledge allows her to act with decisiveness. She no longer waits for proof over months or years. Her awareness allows her to recognize red flags immediately and respond with boundaries rather than reaction. And boundaries, once established by someone of her depth, are not negotiable. They are a statement of self-respect. It is this combination of selectivity and self-respect that creates a sense of danger in people who are used to passive compliance, emotional manipulation, or casual attachment feel exposed. They sense that they cannot take her for granted. She will not compromise her peace for approval, nor will she perform to fit someone else's narrative. Her standards are a mirror, reflecting back the authenticity or deficiencies of those around her. This is uncomfortable for people who've relied on casual control or inconsistency, and it is exactly what makes her formidable. Her high standards do not isolate her, they attract those who are capable of meeting them. And those who are capable are rare because most people have never been challenged to reflect on their own value in the same way she has. She surrounds herself with individuals who are aligned with her principles, who honor her boundaries, and who elevate rather than drain her. This curation is not superficial elitism. It is a necessary survival mechanism for someone who has cultivated clarity, self-sufficiency, and insight. The world often tries to shame women for being selective, calling them difficult, intimidating, or unapproachable. But what society really fears is a woman who refuses to accept mediocrity in herself and in her relationships. A woman who spends time alone, who knows her worth, and who refuses to compromise is not difficult. She is dangerous in the sense that she will not be controlled. She will not be diminished. She will not allow her peace to be traded for convenience or ego gratification. Her standards become her shield and her compass. They guide her choices, define her boundaries, and determine the quality of her interactions. She does not need to justify them, and she does not apologize for them. And in this way, she is unstoppable. When a woman raises her standards, she is no longer vulnerable to manipulation, distraction, or trivialization. She moves through life with purpose, presence, and power. And once you understand the force of a woman who has aligned herself with her own values, you realize that her standards are not restrictions, they are declarations. Declarations that she will no longer tolerate anything less than what she deserves. And that alone makes her dangerous. Once a woman has mastered clarity, cultivated emotional self-sufficiency, and raised her standards, the final transformation emerges naturally. Inner peace becomes her ultimate power. This is not a peace born of passivity or avoidance. It is not a peace that allows her to accept disrespect or settle for less than she deserves. It is a peace forged through years of introspection, solitude, and self-discipline, a peace that cannot be shaken by external chaos or the unpredictability of human behavior, and it is this inner peace that makes her truly dangerous. Inner peace is more than calmness. It is a foundation of sovereignty. When a woman reaches this state, she is no longer at the mercy of circumstances, opinions, or the approval of others. She has anchored herself in her own trust. In her own worth, in her own values. The storms around her, conflict, betrayal, rejection, do not destabilize her because she knows that her equilibrium is hers to maintain. People who have never experienced this are often shocked by it. They are used to triggering reaction, dependence, and drama. But a woman at peace moves through life with a quiet authority that cannot be provoked. This peace allows her to walk away without hesitation when she recognizes misalignment. She does not argue endlessly. She does not beg. She does not compromise her integrity to satisfy someone else's ego. She does not need closure to heal because her sense of wholeness is internal. In a world where most people cling to attachment and fear loss, her ability to detach gracefully is disruptive. It is unsettling to those who rely on emotional leverage or chaos to maintain control, and it is precisely this disruption that makes her presence so commanding. A woman who has claimed her inner peace also understands the value of time and energy. She does not waste her attention on people or situations that do not serve her growth. She recognizes when a conversation, a relationship, or an environment drains rather than elevates her, and she disengages without guilt. Most people do not do this because they are addicted to connection, even if it is toxic. She has broken that addiction. She knows that serenity is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Her peace is not negotiable, and she does not surrender it for anyone. Inner peace also heightens her discernment. When you are at peace with yourself, you notice things that others overlook. You recognize manipulation before it escalates. You sense authenticity without words. You see the patterns of behavior, the intentions behind actions, and the energy that others project. This awareness is not intimidation, it is intelligence applied to human dynamics. And when a woman sees clearly from this calm center, she is untouchable, not because she is unfeeling, but because she has mastered the art of presence. One of the most profound consequences of her inner peace is freedom from desperation. She no longer needs to be needed to feel validated. She does not cling to relationships out of fear of loneliness, nor does she compromise herself for temporary comfort. She has discovered that solitude is not emptiness, it is strength. She has learned that being alone is not a punishment, but a tool for growth, reflection, and restoration. And once a woman has tasted this kind of freedom, she will not exchange it for anything less than authenticity. This piece also reshapes the way she loves and interacts with the world. She engages deeply, but selectively. Her compassion is real, not performative. Her kindness is deliberate, not transactional. And her love is expansive, not dependent. She does not give pieces of herself to those who cannot hold them with respect. She does not tolerate half measures, empty promises, or performative gestures. Her love, like her peace, is a reflection of her self-respect, and it cannot be diluted. Society often misunderstands women who cultivate this level of inner peace. They are labeled as intimidating, unapproachable, or cold, but these labels are reflections of discomfort, not reality. People are unsettled because her presence exposes their own reliance on external validation, their own unresolved chaos, their own inability to stand alone. A woman at peace forces others to confront themselves, and that confrontation is uncomfortable precisely because it is unavoidable. Her inner peace is both shield and sword. It protects her from manipulation, toxicity, and unnecessary suffering, while simultaneously dismantling the power others might hope to hold over her. She cannot be swayed by empty words, pressured by fear, or shaken by uncertainty. She has cultivated a center that is unmovable, and this is the ultimate form of strength. When you witness a woman who moves through life in this state, you realize that she is not waiting for permission, for rescue, or for validation. She has already claimed her power. She has already decided her worth. She has already aligned with her own truth. And that alignment is what makes her dangerous, not in a way that harms, but in a way that commands respect, demands integrity, and elevates the standard for everyone around her. The lesson is clear. Inner peace is not a passive state. It is a powerful declaration of self-mastery. Once a woman achieves it, she can never again allow her life, her emotions, or her boundaries to be dictated by anyone else. She becomes a force that cannot be contained, controlled, or diminished. And that is the final unshakable truth. Her peace is her power, and it is unstoppable.